Let's reflect on those numbers, joined now by Chet Thomas, IRS Forensic Investigator. Chet, good to have you. Thank you very much for coming on. A 6.5% drop in crime in the Gauteng province. The commissioner saying there's better coordination between the policing forces, the Metro, the SAPS, and the supplementary community forums that are coming on board. Do you agree with that?
Very good afternoon to you and to the viewers, and thank you for inviting me onto the show. The cooperation and collaborative policing using what we call force multipliers, whether it's through local policing structures such as the Metro policing or the provincial policing structures such as the Gauteng Traffic Police, under the control of the Scaffolding Police Services, of course, will contribute towards bringing down crime figures and being disruptive and dismantle crime syndicates in terms of proactive operations. One must never underscore the value of the E2 project, which stands for Eyes and Ears, which is a joint SAPS Business Against Crime project that brings security companies into the fold as well, who act as force multipliers on the ground. And one can never exclude the importance of community policing structures. It's from those very communities that the information comes out, and it's those community volunteers that are able to effectively communicate to the community what the police need to do and to the police what the community needs from them.
Despite the province seeing a decrease, though, Gauteng still remains one of the biggest contributors, if you like, 26.5% to the country's overall crime statistics in the third quarter. The commissioner saying that that is just purely due to migration and people moving into this province.
No, there's a lot of contributing factors. Gauteng has over a quarter of all crime reported in the last quarter. That's a massive percentage if one looks at the infrastructure and the size of Gauteng. Yes, we have a diverse population and we are the most populated province in South Africa, and it is a destination for a lot of immigrants, a lot of which are undocumented. But what we're seeing playing across Gauteng as well as in other parts of the country is a lack of effective prosecutions. It's all fair and well that Chanel is making inroads in terms of arrests, and it's all fair and well that we're seeing these saturation projects taking place, which are in by and large assisting the police in combating contact crimes. But the problem lies in the areas of investigation, because it's all fair and well to make arrests, but if you're not investigating the crimes after that, the NPA are not going to enroll those dockets. And those criminals are going to be back in the street literally within 48 hours. And we've seen this firsthand. If you don't have the support structures in place to investigate the crimes purportedly committed by the people that are arrested, you're not going to effectively have convictions. If you don't have convictions, there's no big stick to wave. There's no consequences, there's no accountability. So therein lies a massive problem. And it's not just in Gauteng, it's across the country.
That massive problem, how can it be addressed?
We're always hearing about more boots on the ground, force multipliers, the use of the security industry to assist, local and provincial traffic officials assisting. But all of that is visible policing. All of that is to counter crimes from taking place. It's to take undocumented immigrants off the street. We need more investigators, though. And this is where the police are falling short. At the current figure, we're about 8,000 detectives short in South Africa, and the Hawks are capacitated by about 60% of what their true figure should be. So if you don't have the investigators, you're not going to be able to have successful prosecutors. Yeah. And it's a very deplorable situation that our police officers who are detectives find themselves in, because they're carrying 3 to 4 times the amount of dockets that they should be carrying, and they don't have the necessary resources or infrastructure support that they require. So we need to have fully qualified detectives to supplement all the police officers on the ground to ensure that arrests equal prosecutions, because that's the gap here. We're seeing the arrest, we're seeing the visible policing, but we're not seeing the convictions. Yeah. And criminals know they can get back on the streets in a couple of hours if a docket isn't properly investigated.
So, I mean, politicians tend to want to show us these things that they're doing. We've got 3 helicopters, we've got a panic button that is being launched, we've got cars that have been deployed, we've got guys in green uniform that are out there. How are you saying all these without of course, successful prosecution are just really putting a plaster on a wound that is infected?
You hit the nail on the head. I call it the Band-Aid approach. And that's exactly what it is. It's putting a plaster on something that's festering. and then that plaster gets put somewhere else and put somewhere else, but it doesn't stop the systemic levels of crime. So what we have to do is we have to address this issue of arrest versus conviction. So I'll give you an example. When the NPA talks about successful convictions, the figures are somewhat disingenuous because they're talking about successful convictions of matters that they have enrolled, not in respect of cases that have been opened and investigated by the South African Police Service. So when you look at the number of murders reported versus the number of convictions in terms of those numbers of cases opened, you're only looking at 10 to 12% of all murders being solved in the country. When you look at rape, the figures are even worse. You look at maybe only 5% of rapes that are reported actually being solved. And that's because the NPA will not enroll a docket unless they know there's a successful chance of prosecution. If there isn't a prospect of a successful prosecution, they won't enroll their case. And I think the minister came out this week and said that there's just under 2 million dockets that are outstanding in terms of investigation. During Becky Taylor's time, in 5 years, there were 5 million dockets that were closed as undetected. So we're seeing a lot of energy from the new minister, a lot of energy from our provincial commissioners, especially Tommy Mtombeni from Gauteng, Nhlameza from Gauteng, Patakile from Western Cape, and we want to see this across the board. But more arrests is not going to stop the situation in the country unless those people who are arrested are convicted.
Yeah. The chairperson of the Gauteng Community Safety Portfolio Committee, Bandile Masuku, was talking about the latest incident which we saw happening in Sandton at that solo restaurant, saying there is some kind of trend that is beginning to emerge, and it's raising some big questions, for example, around the use of individuals using private security and so on and so forth to protect themselves against heavy guns. What does that say about what is happening? I mean, it's probably prevalent here in Gauteng, but it's also happening elsewhere, like in other provinces.
I'm so glad you raised that. The security industry is one of the most important industries in South Africa for a number of reasons. Number one, it's the biggest employer in the country in terms of the private sector. It replaced mining a long time ago. You've got hundreds of thousands of people employed in that sector, and they're also necessary and required in terms of fighting crime. But we're seeing the emergence of underworld characters buying security companies, using proxies or front companies to buy up security companies because they've got access to legitimate weapons. Those security officers, those VIP protection, those so-called bodyguards are then being used to fight proxy wars. They're being used for ego. They're being used for a whole host of reasons for which they aren't actually required. And it's a massive, massive problem. We've seen in KZN where security companies have been bought up by taxi bosses, and those taxi bosses have used those security companies to run proxy wars against other taxi bosses who in turn have bought up security companies. We've now seen this emergence of security companies being used in what we call murder for hire, where Izinkabi are brought up from KZN in security vehicles using security weapons to take out people. This is a horrendous issue, and it's a frightening issue because we're expecting the security companies rather than the industry as a whole to be assisting the police in combating crime. And you can't have the police now having to look over their shoulder and investigate what should be their partner in this fight against crime.
Does this call for a regulating of the security sector, as the portfolio committee chair is saying that we need to raise this issue with CIRA, because if we are not, I mean, from what you're saying, we might even see the murder rate going up, and this would be purely because of these proxy wars that are being fought using private security companies?
So the legislation's there. It started in 1987 with the original Security Officers Act, which established the Security Officers Board. In 2001, it was repealed and a new act came into effect known as the Private Security Industry Regulation Act, which created the Private Security Industry Regulatory Authority, which we all know as CIRA. CIRA is the biggest regulatory authority in the country. There's over 2.2 million people registered within the industry, of which about 500, 600, 700 are actually gainfully employed in the industry. CIRA has a massive task to clean up the industry, and they are trying their utmost. Every single day you'll see on their social media streams and in their media releases where they've arrested people that are impersonating security officers, companies that are unregistered to provide services, people who are carrying guns they shouldn't be carrying. But they are so incapacitated in terms of investigator numbers. So they have an inspectorate, and those inspectorates have full peace officer status, which means they have the same powers as police officers to make arrests, etc. But CIRA doesn't have enough of those inspectors. The investigation component at CIRA needs to be fully capacitated because they work hand in glove with the police. What a lot of people are unaware of is that CIRA, as a government regulatory authority, actually falls under the Department of Police, and the Deputy Minister of Police sits on the board of CIRA. So CIRA plays an important component, but again, with this industry becoming so massive and in such a quick space of time, they need more capacity and they need more inspectors.
Chair Thomas, we appreciate your intervention this afternoon. Thank you very much for coming on, reflecting on those statistics released by the Commissioner for the third quarter when it comes to the Gauteng province.